And I'm Joy Vernon. I am the organizer for the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup.
I probably should introduce myself too. My name is John Allen. I am the organizer for Tarot Geeks here in Denver, which I took over from Joy after she founded that particular institution here. And we're just trying to carry on the good work.
And today we're looking at the images of the Decans. And we're going to be doing Aquarius 1, 2, and 3 today, which correlate to the 5, 6, and 7 of swords. And so we're going to be looking at a variety of the decanic images from history and meditating on them and exploring them and discussing them. So that's our agenda.
Probably only to say that it's going to remind everyone that we are dealing mainly with traditional astrology and traditional rulerships and the like. What we're also utilizing is the Chaldean order, which is the rulership of the planets and the decans that goes from a pattern from slowest planet to fastest planet. In case that is of any particular interest to people, and I'm sure it is. What we're going to do first is we're going to explore each of the decans one by one. We're also going to explore in each decan a variety of images one by one, from ranging from the 12th century to the present time. And so I want to do this. We will do some visual aid here. So our first decan is ruled by the planet Venus, even though and just bearing in mind that this is a more, this kind of rulership is a subversion or like a micromanaging position under the traditional ruler for Aquarius overall, which is Saturn. It's known as the Lord of Defeat in tarot, at least that particular path of the 5 of swords, which we're going to be looking at a little more closely in a little later. And in contrast to what we talked about last time with Capricorn, the last image we were left with there was a man on a throne sitting in front of his kingdom, holding on to what he's got. And in this particular decan, we're stepping down from that throne and exploring what lies beyond that order that had been previously established in Capricorn. A lot of it has to do with just leaving behind all those creature comforts and exploring things that perhaps have not been tried or true yet, but also engaging in some creative and independent work. And what I will do, and I think I'm glad you insisted on this, Joy, because what we're going to be doing first is we're going to be looking at the written descriptions of the decans first before, or the magical images before we actually see an image. That gives everyone an opportunity to visualize it in their heads, which is an important skill to have when you're doing magical work. It really, that's where it really comes alive, is when it's inside your mind. But we're going to go through 6 examples, each from different time periods. And we'll give you an opportunity to just see these for a moment first. Our first description is from Ibn Ezra, the earliest of the ones. He describes it as a black man who is skilled in copper. And copper, of course, is a symbol for Venus, the ruler of this decan. And the man is a symbolic reference to the planet Saturn, which is the overall ruler. Picatrix is our next one. It is a man whose head is mutilated and holds a peacock in his hand. This is a face of misery, poverty, and slavery. Now, the peacock is also a symbol of Venus, in case you didn't know that, but we also have that Venus imagery coming through here. Although we have also the next description, which is fairly similar, comes from Agrippa, the form of a prudent man and of a woman spinning. And the signification of these is in the thought and labor for gain, in poverty and business. And we have a bit of a theme of hardship that comes with departing from the established norms. Bruno is our next, the father of a family and his wife with thoughtful countenances. He has a counting stone in his hand, and she holds a colander. Our fifth description is from Aleister Crowley. And here you might see a pattern developing here when we go. We start with a very, very simple description. We get a little more elaborate extra visual information, and then we go back to the simplicity again as we get a little closer to our current time. So Crowley's description is a man with a bowed head and a bag in his hand. And our sixth description comes from Austin Coppock, the most recent one. It reads simply the mark of exile associated with this decan of Aquarius. And don't worry about taking notes. All this stuff is in the handout. All these descriptions are there. But we'll go ahead and
I'd like to throw in a little something right at this point. You use the word visualize, which is the word that we commonly use for this, but I do want to remind people that when we talk about visualization, it is more of an experiential thing. And so if you feel like you can't visualize, that's fine. It's more about imagining. So try other senses, experiences. What if you bumped into a person like this? What if you were at a craft fair and bumped into somebody who was skilled with copper? Like, would that be attractive to you? Like, what would you think of the work that they did? Kind of imagine it. And the other thing I wanted to say, of course, is that these are odd images, and all of them across the board are pretty weird. There are a few that are a little more normal, but mostly they're pretty weird. And we don't fully know all of the reasons why these images were developed. And we talked about this before, how old they are and how they appear across cultures. Austin Coppock's book is the go-to on that, 36 Faces. But the idea of images that are startling helps you remember things. And it is part of the memory palace technique. And so there's kind of like maybe an assumption it seems logical that maybe these things are related to that practice. But of course, in this section, we get a couple people with mutilated heads. We get the just uncomfortable things about poverty and misery and baseness, things like that. And so, it can bring us out of our comfort zone for sure, but at the same time, there's I guess I'm not very good at explaining. I'm like, what is the benefit? What is the benefit of this? I think there's something, I guess the thing that I get from this is more of that sense of connection with experiences that are outside my own experiences, which eventually leads to compassion. And that's also compassion is just kind of a thing that I've worked hard on connecting with and developing. And so maybe that's just my personal experience of what I've gotten from working with these. I do think the visualization part itself is very valuable as well. But I'm also interested just to know, and maybe this is a I don't want to jump, I don't want to lead us astray. I'm like, that might be a good discussion point. Maybe we'll save it for next time. But at some point, just like after we've had a few sessions and started working with it, just like have people share what they're getting out of it. John, do you have anything in particular? You've really worked with this extensively in terms of entering all of those into AI and trying to get AI to show you what you have in your mind. What do you think, what benefits do you think these have for you?
Well, I mean, in terms of putting it into the AI process, it's a similar to me. It's a similar process as when we take these written descriptions, we put them in our own minds, and our imagination and our deeper um, repositories of knowledge fill in those blanks. And AI does it in a similar way. It just does it with a more of a collective consciousness type of thing where we're all it's just taking all of this information from the internet and the things that people put on there and deciding for itself. And I like the idea of it being something that is a bit not quite as you expected to be in your own heads, because that shows you that this description has a life of its own, and that it's that's a good part of the magic to allow that image to have its own existence and to be able to converse with it and to be able to work with it and in a more engaging way. I think that's the biggest difference. I mean, that's the what I as far as the takeaway of working with this with AI and with imagining it in my own head.
We've got a question over here. The she says the only reference that is familiar to her is Crowley. I don't know anything about the other categories, and a little background is useful, which I agree and understand that. I think that the I'm not sure about the word category though, and that all of these are images of the first decan of Aquarius. So the category would be the first decan of Aquarius. Okay, so there's clarification over here. For example, she doesn't know what Picatrix is or what it represents. That's what she meant by category. So these would all be magical, spiritual and magical texts.
I just don't know. The only thing that was familiar to me was Crowley. So I wasn't really sure with all the, I'm just a very visual person. So when there's nothing but words, I get very lost. So that's why I needed some clarification on what this particular slide was demonstrating or was supposed to provide, and then having context about Picatrix or those types of things. That just helps me kind of ground what it is and what we're looking at. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what we're doing, and we are going to go into the visual aspect of it right after this. Once we got this, just gives you an opportunity to just read a description and form a picture in your mind of that what it's describing, regardless of what the source might be, or in a consequence of where the source might be, just to give you a differences of these particular. That's one of the reasons I think why we called the series Faces of the Decans, because these are different cultural and temporal aspects of that particular decan.
And again, even if you're not good at visualizing, it's still a symbol set. And so where do you see references to Aquarius or to its ruler Saturn or to the Decan ruler Venus? And John and I were, or John, I think, was basically pointing these out, but references to poverty and lack are Saturnian things. The color black is Saturnian, the color green is Venusian. The peacock is a symbol of Venus. Copper is a symbol of Venus. Women are symbols of Venus. So exile is a symbol of Saturn. So even if you can't visualize, this is a really good time just to spend. And again, remember what we talked about last time, which is the decanic images were not originally illustrations. They were originally words. And the word image often refers to a talisman. And so a lot of times they were anything that's a magical image describes something that you would imagine or draw or etch in order to create, in order to connect magically with some kind of energy. And so there's a lot of the whole practice behind this is of translating words into images, but also translating it into some kind of understanding, some kind of exploration of the symbols here, and so on. So that's why we have a slide of just words, because all of these were originally just words. And I don't mean to harp on this, but I was the one that insisted that John include this. So I feel like I have to provide an apologia or something. But yeah, it's something to just get these images into our craw and start processing them. And it's not about the history of it. It really has nothing to do with that, to be honest. It's about the fact that this is the sign of Aquarius. It's about the fact that Saturn is a traditional ruler of Aquarius. It's about the fact that the first third of Aquarius is ruled by Venus. That's what it's about, and exploring those symbols and just vibing with them through these weird descriptions of little scenes. Okay, John, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, good. I'm glad. It is murky. It is definitely murky. I will absolutely grant you that it is murky, and I am murky on a lot of it too. And so to me, it's always about finding the glints of light in it.
Oh yeah, I know the feeling. So let's see. Let's go and look at our images. So these are obviously what AI made of descriptions. Of course, even this was black man who's skilled in copper. And we can probably just take a moment and take a look at this. Or we'll take a moment and take a look, because we've already kind of talked about them a bit. Why don't we maybe we can just step back and allow for some just pure visual communication with these. We have Picatrix. Agrippa. Bruno. Of 6 different images, all representing the same decan. And what we'd like to do in this case is to do a little bit of a scrying exercise where we concentrate on the dark portion of our monitor, our screens, with these images in our peripheral vision, and allow an image to come to us. It's maybe more personalized, or something that has a little more of our personality attached to it. And we should probably, let's see, be about a few minutes through to some scrying. Okay, we can come back now. Did anybody see or encounter anything that was different or similar to what we've been seeing? We can also open the discussion up about the images themselves, all of them.
Well, for the first two, what comes to me was passion was a really big word that came out, especially the first one. I got a very big Eight of Pentacles vibe off of that. But then I kind of was looking at the cherubs as perhaps that distraction or that thing that would talk you out of what your passion is and perhaps distract you from what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Kind of like the chirping in the ear of, oh, you can't do that, you can't make it happen, or something along those lines. Because then even in the third one with the man and the woman, I get this, well, now what do we do with this thing? It's like they're defeated before they even started.
Yeah, and that's a good theme that's represented here in this particular decan. It describes the hardship that's involved in stepping away from the status quo, basically, and leaving all of those creature comforts behind and starting up something new.
I know that there's resilience as part of Saturn's, I guess, characteristics, but I'm still learning on some of this. But it also seems like there's more defiance in some of these images than you would expect.
I think that was one of the things Austin Coppock kind of addresses in his chapter on this decan. The and kind of the contrast between the time period a lot of these images were created, where it would be much more difficult to go against his concept was primarily exile. Remember, Austin Coppock's primary word was exile. And so how much more difficult at the time it would have been to go against the societal structure and things like that. And it's a lot easier to do nowadays. But yeah.
I think back in the old days, it had more physical consequences, or at least you were actually living like in the wilderness, outside the influences of city states and whatnot. And here, I think maybe the hardship is a little more psychological, which is I think appropriate with Aquarius being an air sign. A lot of that struggle takes place in the mind.
Well, and Venus is one of the symbols for money. Different people, some people put Jupiter with money and some people put Venus with money. But just the idea of what are people what is the work people are doing to earn their income? And if they are exiled, then what would they do? I mean, if you're ill, which Saturn governs, illness, incapacity, things like that, lameness, if you're ill, how are you going to earn any money? You have to rely on handouts from other people. And, some of these, we see the copper maker, who's obviously of all the group, he seems like he's got it down. He's like, okay, I don't have a lot of money. I can't invest in gold, but I can definitely pick up some copper cheap and I can make some pretty things and sell them. And he does seem like he's the most successful here. And the person that's spinning, that it's like, okay, I've got something I can do here that can earn me some income. I'm not sure what the lady with the colander is up to, but obviously she looks like she's working. So I think there's a little bit, some of these seem to address that. I think address, how do you make your money if you don't have any, and you've got to kind of do it on your own. You don't work for somebody. You don't have a sponsor or patron or any kind of job or anything. How do you do this on your own?
Okay, so we're going to transition. Well, we're going to be probably also looking at one image in particular from one source. So I think last time we focused on Crowley's images, and today we're going to focus on the Picatrix, which is something that a source that Crowley borrowed very, very heavily from in his descriptions. And we're going to just compare that to the minor card, which is associated with this deck, and which is the Seven of Swords. So we'll bring up, this is, the Picatrix version of the image with the written description. And now we also have the card, Five of Swords. Rendered here is of course the Rider-Waite-Smith version of the card, which is probably the one that most everyone is familiar with. And what we ask to do here is, based on the exploration that we've had of this deck so far, is to be able to ask the question, how do we see the astrology in the image? And we did talk about that a little bit, previously. But here I would like to see how we see that astrology in the tarot card, and how these magical images can influence or supplements the interpretations thereof.
And I'm gonna go ahead and start just to kind of get the ball rolling. But and we did see certain things. Saturn, as a ruler of Aquarius, is associated with difficulties and challenges and incapacity or illness. And so the mutilated head might be part of that. Also, Aquarius, as a personality thing is considered intelligent. I don't know if that's more of a modern way of looking at it. So Saturn maybe mutilates that intelligence or something. But also Saturn is considered thin. Emaciated is what we get here. So really interesting illustration. And then Venus, I like the fact that it's got the peacock, because Venus is beauty and pleasure and enjoyment. And it seems like here is, whereas some of the decans were more about you're losing your Venus qualities because Saturn says no to things. This is like, this man is hurt, he's impoverished, he is emaciated, but he has a thing of beauty that he holds close to his heart. And so I don't know. I just find these things fascinating.
It's like his one bit of dignity, which he is holding close to himself. It's like saying the world can take all of this stuff from me, but this is something that it can never, ever take.
I love that. And with the Five of Swords, a lot of people, I I think maybe I have made it a goal to not interpret tarot cards the way other people do, just out of my own Saturn conjunct my sun and my own stubbornness. But swords are the element air and represent communication, and Venus is love. And I think of the Five of Swords as being about, and fives are conflict. So I think of the Five of Swords as being able to communicate your conflicts to your people that are close to you, to your relationships, to your partner in if we're actually doing a relationship reading. And so communicating conflicts, I think, is a really big part of the of the symbolism of that card with the, again, swords as communication, fives as conflict, and Venus as love. And I think that there's a little bit, you know, we all know that communication is the key to a good relationship, but man, being able to communicate what's wrong with the relationship, if you can just keep your mouth shut and just go with the flow, it is so much easier, right? And to be able to speak up and say, you know what, this actually bothers me, and to know when, and to know what things to be like, oh my God, nobody cares about that, but to find the thing that actually is a real, true problem that can lead to such a like an opening in the relationship and a solution, a dissolution of the conflict itself and a solution to that. And can bring people so much closer together once they get, you know, oh, okay, you know, I didn't realize that. Now I understand. So I actually like this card for relationships.
Hmm. Yeah, it also highlights too that, you know, there are with any of these cards, there's constructive and destructive aspects or different ways that you could use that intelligence.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is, you know, it speaks to, I think, you know, probably the uncertainty of, you know, exploring this particular, you know, reign. You're just starting out in the Aquarian paradigm here, and it's you're venturing into unknowns.
And this is where Pluto is transiting right now, as we're all well aware.
Pluto transits are, wow, yeah. I,
You
I went
know.
through, well, I went through Capricorn, like went right over my sun, and my God, that was not a very fun time. Anyway, so if there's no further comment on this, we can go ahead and go to our next decan. What do you think, Joey?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So our second decan is ruled by Mercury, the and so I think, you know, with this rulership of Mercury of this of central decan of Aquarius, it um, brings the idea of of an old kingdom versus a new kingdom, which is being, you know, set up in the first decan, or at least, you know, the opportunities are being explored for good creative independent work there. And this decan with Mercury is all about communication and bridging these two kingdoms together. And so with with Mercury ruling things like transportation, I think, you know, transportation overall is, you know, when we speak to one another, we're transporting ideas from one mind to another. And I think, you know, that you know, we're communicating ideas and transporting ideas, and that's how kingdoms are built, when with the kind of knowledge and awareness. It's also about being successfully independent in those worlds without necessarily being bound to them. So we'll go ahead and we'll do this again, the written descriptions first again, and I will try to update the dates on these in the future scenarios here, but I'll make sure I'll get those up. So well, again, we're going to start with the same batch of people. Here, Ibn Ezra, and it might be, some curious language at times due to the translation, but it's a very black man whose beard is long, and in his hand is bow and arrows, and purses that contain precious stones and gold. A Picatrix description: a man who looks like a king, who permits much to himself and abhors what he sees. This is a face of beauty and position, having what is desired: completion, detriment, and debility. Cornelius Agrippa's description: the form of a man with a long beard, and the significant nation of this belongeth to the understanding, meekness, modesty, liberty, and good manners. Bruno's description: a man wearing the clothes of a counselor, seated and holding in his hand a small piece of paper with reminders on it. From his very long chin hangs a beard, another beard, and he seems to have a severe countenance. Crowley: a man arrayed like a king, looking with pride and conceit on all around him. And Kopic's description is simply heaven and earth, or the meeting thereof. Already we've got a fine collection of beards here in this decan. And I mean, there's probably two things I can say about that. I mean, there's one, there could be, this is like, a little bit of a curse of the patriarchy. The beards are equating to, sovereignty, and that the suggestion is that only men can aspire to this, which is completely untrue, obviously. But I also probably would also point out that there are definitely masculine and feminine depictions in a lot of these different descriptions. And usually, like, for a lot of reasons that Joy had mentioned earlier, the feminine symbols do stand for certain types of things that masculine symbols are not, and vice versa. Is there anything you wanted to point out, any observations about these descriptions you want to point out, Joy?
Well, I remember studying Mercury on Christopher Warnock's website, and the idea of long faces and lean faces and thin hair, I think, but a beard. I remember all of those being there, but I don't think he was pulling from these sources because he listed his sources. So it's interesting. And I think of Mercury, I always think of Mercury as young and lithe and fast and small and thin and kind of like a gymnast. My thought of Mercury as like a gymnast, maybe a swimmer or something. Obviously a runner. He's the messenger of the gods, and is fast in the way that he moves. But any of those, but he's traditionally associated with a gymnast as well. And so I don't necessarily think of any of those: a swimmer, like a bicycle racer, a runner. Those things usually don't have a lot of hair because they don't want the wind resistance. So I'm kind of like, interesting.
And it is, maybe to speak to that, it's a fixed sign, and this is a decan with a fixed quality about it as well. A succeeding quality, as Crowley uses the terminology. So it's a good representation of the, at least of the fixed quality, or it is itself fixed, and Mercury is fixed in this box. So It probably has a little more opportunities there for beard growing.
I love it.
I mean, it could just be someone was trying to put together the band ZZ Top long ago.
That's perfect.
That would have been good. Well, I didn't ask for ZZ Top in the AI stuff, so I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. But we'll get some pretty good competition. You want to go? You want to see these? We'll see these images next.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll again start with Ibn Ezra's, and again about 30 seconds each. Picatrix.
Do you mind reading the descriptions again when these come up, John?
Sure. So this is a man who looks like a king, who permits much to himself and abhors what he sees. This is a face of beauty and position, having what is desired, completion, detriment, and debility. And the previous slide was simply a very black man with bows and arrows and bags of precious stones and gold. Here we have Agrippa, the form of a man with a long beard. And the signification of this belongeth to the understanding, meekness, modesty, liberty, and good manners. Bruno's a man wearing the clothes of a counselor, seated and holding in his hand a small piece of paper with reminders on it. From his very long chin hangs a beard, and he seems to have a severe countenance. Mr. Crowley's a man arrayed like a king, looking with pride and conceit on all around him. And Austin Coppock's description is heaven and earth. Now we have our 6 images. And we can take a few moments to contemplate the empty space with these images, again in our periphery, and silently wait for an image to appear to us. Okay, I think that'll do. And again, we can open up the discussion regarding these images and our meditations.
Well, I got something this time. I got the first thing that came to mind was a mirror, and I think I got that maybe from Austin's image. But then when I had the mirror, I was thinking of the king who didn't like what was below him, and I got the macroprosopos, microprosopos image from Eliphas Levi, and just this idea of the uh, unclear reflection that you get with more natural mirrors, like looking in water or something. And the disdainful king, whose society that he rules is going to be a reflection of what he is putting out into that society. And so it's and the reflection idea, the duality of that goes along with Mercury's ruling of Gemini and the twins and some things like that. All of the air signs have a certain duality to them. Aquarius being that water bearer and pouring that water out from above to below. There could even be some of that.
It's almost like projection that we were describing too. It's like they're projecting onto their society what is, what they don't like in themselves, or at least
Yeah, what if we could all learn to just project what we like somehow? I know it's not the definition of projection, but it would be so nice. Keep going.
I think I was done with that, but there is that I think a current of growing dissatisfaction with, I think, with the Aquarian paradigm in general, because they're able to see, their mode of intelligence is one of where it's, I think, Stephen Forrest, the evolutionary astrologer, describes the archetype for Aquarius to be the genius, who isn't necessarily, I mean, the word genius doesn't necessarily mean super intelligent per se. It just means you can think in ways that you haven't been taught to think, in ways that are more original, and in ways like, they can rise above a lot of the standardized information that you find in society and whatnot. And then I was able to pinpoint, like, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't look like it's working right over there. And they may be spending their entire lifetimes trying to convince people that's what they see. And there's also, I guess we can see there's a bit of a Cassandra complex going on with that. Hence the grumpy kings.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Anyone else have any comments?
I'm thinking the phrase water bearer for Aquarius, the bear, when you think of something that's weight bearing or that bears a burden, it speaks, I think, to that fixed quality of the air. And so that part does lend to the idea of these kind of kingly, fixed characters. And so I think, at least for me, in the images that you've compiled, John, it seems like the bearing part is really at play here.
Okay.
bearing the weight of riches, bearing the weight of responsibility, the weight of society, age, etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's that bearing or that weight that that can keep the airy, free-flowing mental nature of a fixed air sign, kind of maybe that above and below, or that dichotomy or that tension of that wanting that airy desire to soar and just, like you said with Mercury, fast, speedy, but that idea of bearing the weight of water, kind of at odds with that maybe.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I guess we can move to our selected image and tarot card now. Again, we're going to stick with Picatrix. So that is this image here of one of our grumpy kings. Actually, I'd actually want to point out in the language, in both this one and Crowley's, it's a man who just looks like a king, who may not necessarily be one, but is decked out like one. And our card is the Six of Swords, Lord of Earned Success. I know when Austin Coppock talks about this card in his book, he does focus on the boatman more so than the passengers that he has in his boat. And as if, I think I've heard a lot of people in the past focus on the passengers and saying that this is their journey. But I think Coppock is, at least, putting that forward an argument that this could be the boatman's journey, and that it's his particular skill that he can transport people, goods, ideas from one shore to another.
In the comments we have, I like how both this and the previous decan of Picatrix can be the supporting characters of their parallel cards. And that, because yeah, this is the man looks like a king and abhors what he sees, and the previous decan was the mutilated, emaciated man that was holding the peacock. Mutilated, emaciated, and impoverished man that was holding the peacock. I forget the exact words that it's supposed to be. But yeah. Interesting. They are those reflections of each other.
A little bit of that, more of that dichotomy that we were talking about as well.
And she goes on, she says, is the battered man one of the folks walking away from the battle in the five? Is the king who they are escaping? Ooh, really, really nice connection between the decanic images and the tarot images. Really nice, really nice.
Are there any other observations here? But as far as how does that Aquarian quality show through in the card?
Well, I think Mercury as travel and transportation fits in, and Aquarius as, one of my original keywords that I learned for Aquarius was utopia. And I don't know that I hear people use that one as much, but I still think it's part of that visionary idealism that we get with Aquarius. And so this idea of travel Mercury to your utopia, to your better place, I think is a lot, I think is a fairly influential, a fairly strong influence on this card, on the tarot card. I have to admit, I don't see I'm not sure I'm seeing the Mercury as much in the Picatrix imagery.
Shall we move on? Or
Yeah, unless anybody else has any thoughts. I mean, the only thing I'm coming up with for the man who looks like a king is Mercury as the ruler of commerce. And so somebody that is who has earned their success, who has uh you know, I got my money the old-fashioned way. I earned it. I'm not a king, but I earned my way to a high position through commerce, and kind of bootstrapped himself up to a noble position, but looks back, and that could be an interesting interpretation. He looks back on his own youth and his own upbringing, and abhors his own past, that maybe he had been born impoverished, and then through his own work and his own development and his success with Venus, money, and then Mercury, commerce, he achieved a king-like position, but is not able to come to terms with his upbringing and his past.
I mean, it describes it as one who looks like a king, and Mercury does have that trickster affiliation. So there could also be this idea of fraudulence and deceiving appearance, and some kind of trickery involved as well. At least with the Mercury, like you, I'm having a harder time reconciling these two images for sure. But as far as trickster, that was kind of all that I came up with for looks like a king.
I love that, and I do think that that guy in the picture looks like Loki. So
instance of that, yes. And I think probably that, and you also have to bear in mind too that this is also under the overall rulership of Saturn. I see a lot of Saturn in this picture, and maybe Saturn is kind of in maneuvering Mercury into some very specific kind of things as far, and that I think with that, I mean, you could look at this also as maybe as being a king of commerce, and that his motivation is both escaping the Saturnian poverty that was experienced in the first decan, and then using that Saturnian discipline to work their way out of that in their own way. And here they have, I guess, well, they're now looking at the community that they are, I guess, are not really serving, I guess, but interacting with. And he's probably asking himself, why can't you guys do this? I did it, and I didn't need anybody to show me the way. And maybe that's probably a little where that Saturnian sternness comes from in the expression.
yeah.
Okay. Third decan. I think we've got enough time to do that.
Yep, we're good.
So with the third decan, so ruled by the moon in the Chaldean system. I think here and Austin talks about this in his book also. He does say that this is the decan where you pretty much step away from the known altogether, and owing to some growing frustration and anger with the status quo. And it's not simply a practical type of frustration, but it's also a spiritual struggle as well, where it highlights the kind of karmic entanglements that people might have in their particular struggle to get their independence going. And again, I think probably speaking to that Saturnian overall influence here, kind of overshadowing the moon a bit. We'll go ahead and review these descriptions in the written form. Ibn Ezra, we have an angry and deceitful black man who has hair in his ear, and on him a crown from leaves from a tree, and he turns from place to place. Picatrix, another man. Okay, this is a man also having a mutilated head, and an old woman is with him. This is a face of abundance, accomplishing of will and of giving offense. Agrippa's description in the third face, which is the Decan, of course, that we're talking about, ascendeth a black and angry man. And the significations of this is in expressing insolence and impudence. Bruno's description in the third face is an angry youth whose face is inflamed with rage. His hands are raised as if to strike. His fingers are twisted. With Crowley, a small-headed man dressed like a woman, and with him an old man. And Kopic's description is simply the knot. So we have more frustration, I think it's being, again, being described here, at least in terms of Agrippa's and Bruno's. And there's some indication of that in even Israel's description of the man who is turning from place to place. I think, he's as if he was searching for something, and in an agitated way. And I know Crowley is also, again, he's taking some more pages from the Picatrix in his book, but at least, he had downgraded this to at least to a small-headed man rather than a mutilated head. And again, I think, the Arabic translations of Picatrix are going to be a little different. I don't think the original, or at least I don't think the Arabic one called for someone having a mutilated head per se. So let's go ahead and we'll take a look at the pictures. And again, I will read the descriptions. So now here we have Ibn Ezra's, an angry and deceitful black man who has hair in his ear, and on him is a crown from leaves of a tree, and he turns from place to place. Picatrix, a man having a mutilated head, and an old woman is with him. This is a face of abundance, accomplishing of will, and of giving offense. Agrippa, a black and angry man, and with the significations of this is in expressing insolence and impudence. Bruno, an angry youth whose face is inflamed with rage. His hands are raised as if to strike. His fingers are twisted. Cruelly, a small-headed man dressed like a woman, and with him an old man. And I know his head is particularly small, but this is what I get. And now Austin Kopic's not. Okay, and then we have our 6 images, and again, our meditation on these for a few minutes. Okay, we'll come back here with this. I think in the previous meditation, I had to shut my eyes, and that actually helped a little bit to kind of take in some of the periphery.
Yeah, I will add that I've never had good luck. The general rules for scrying are that you focus not on the thing that you're scrying on, which in this case would be the actual computer screen, the black space there, but focus in between. I think of it as trying to see rain. If the rain is really light and you're walking in the rain, you can't like look where you're going. You have to kind of look in between to see the rain. That's how I think of it. And so when you start to do that, you'll see when you're looking at something you're scrying on, you'll start to see kind of this smoke form. And that's when you'll start to get your own images. I always got the impression that you had to keep your eyes open, but I took a class on it one time, and the instructor let us know that we did not have to keep our eyes open. And I do much better when I do close my eyes and let my own thoughts and imagination create the image internally instead of seeing it before me. And it's just a question of different ways people experience this visualization process.
Would you say that this process, at least that we're attempting to do, is a bit experimental?
Say that again. I don't think I understand.
Would
Is the
you say that
process
the process that we're using right here with multiple imagery, is it somewhat experimental in its approach?
I don't know. Maybe. Um, in some ways, I mean, I've certainly done things where I've tried, there's the whole enter a tarot card idea, but I've heard of entering two tarot cards, or at least I know I've tried it on my own. And I assume that I had heard of it, and that's why I tried it, not because I made it up, but maybe I made it up. So I guess I'm not like, I guess there is a little bit of familiarity I have with working with more than one thing. But there might be, it's certainly experimental to be doing it during a meetup on a computer screen with the decanic images. I don't think anybody's come up with that exact combination of things and a technique. I don't know. What do you guys think? I find it useful personally.
Yeah, I'd have to do it again later, just because I've got too many windows open on my computer to keep track of it, all the stuff, everything here. So I have to, yeah, I don't have an uncluttered screen to utilize.
Well, I think doing anything with a lot of technology definitely modifies the experience from, what I might normally do with scrying, which might be no lights, no computer, no technology around me, just maybe candlelight or something like that. And you can use a mirror or a mirror covered with a gauzy cloth, or a obsidian mirror, or a bowl of water, or a goblet of water. You can put ink in the water. There's like all kinds of things that you can use to scry on, and you can just scry into not into a object. You can just scry into space. You can scry on an image, such as a tarot card or other symbols. Yeah, there's all ways of doing it. So there's a comment over in the comments that says mutilated comes up a few times because it was in Decan 1 as well. I wonder the significance of this word during the times of the writing. Yeah, it's a hard one, and I was thinking about that too. And the thing that came to mind is that that's actually one of the ways that we learned about the brain in older time periods, is when somebody would have damage to their brain. It's how we learned, first of all, the different hemispheres of the brain. You know, somebody gets hit on this side of the head, and the thing that goes wrong is on the opposite side of their body. And it's like, what? Why is that? How does that work? And so having brain damage or mutilation to the head was a really important learning tool. As negative as that is, and as unpleasant as that is, it really gave you know, the scientists of all time periods, the ones that thought about things and found solutions to things and understood things, it gave them really good insight and info on how things worked. You know, if somebody gets hit in this part of the head, what happens to them? They get hurt on that part of the head, left or right, like at different angles. It really produced a lot of knowledge. So, and there's where else I come up with some brain things came up. It's illustrated in art. It seems like there's when people first started doing kind of an unusual form of brain surgery, there's artists that recorded that, and I want to say there was somebody like Bosch or Bruegel or something that has a painting of a man having his head examined by a doctor that's kind of trying to figure it out as he goes along. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some really interesting stuff that goes along with the mutilated head thing. And I guess that does fit into the Aquarian. You know, I did a talk on Pluto and Aquarius at the beginning of the month. And Aquarius has such that, especially when you think of I mean, this is some of the Iranian rulership, but it has such a sense of experimentation. And John said, is this experimental, what we're doing? Maybe it is. But there's such a sense of experimentation and of technology and innovation that comes with the Aquarian qualities. And Aquarius, and I didn't mention this, but Venus is not debilitated or anything in Aquarius, but it's definitely a place where she's not comfortable. And likewise, the moon is not comfortable in Aquarius. Neither one of them, because they're both much more emotional and they're much more expressive. And Aquarius is very analytical and is not comfortable feeling its emotions or feeling, you know, its pleasures and enjoyments. It analyzes them and understands them. And so our first and third decans here are a lot less comfortable for their planets, whereas Mercury works pretty well. And we see that in the tarot card. The 5 and 7 of swords are more difficult, and the 6 of swords is one of the nicest sword cards in the suit. I was going somewhere with this. And my head is mutilated. Anyway, I forget where I was going.
Joy,
You want to
oh,
go? Let's
okay.
actually go and look at the man with the mutilated head a little closer. And we'll bring up our card again as well. That's one reason I decided to select Picatrix as our test image here for as it relates to the card, because of that mutilation theme that kept coming back. We started out as, you know, being injured, and then rose to prominence, and now it almost seems like he's coming back, you know, full circle again in a way. Although he has, again, this, you know, very strong Saturnian image of an old woman beside him, know, that that's a symbol of not just of age but of experience.
And someone earlier had commented on kind of the cyborg interpretation of this head mutilation, which I think is very Aquarian. Somebody says, I can see the trend continuing. There is a potential menacing in the older man. Is that why there is a need to steal the weaponry? Yeah, nice. Yeah.
And there's definitely an element of deception that comes with the interpretation of the seven as well. All is not quite what it seems. He's walking on tiptoe. He's being very discreet about what he's doing. So it's almost as if he's like kind of still operating under that mercurial influence from the previous, but having to do so, I think, much more delicately because now it's the moon is involved, and the moon is a very changeable planet, a very swiftly changeable planet, as we know.
Oh, nice. Okay, so what what we've got over here in the comments brings to mind the 5 and 7 of swords. The comment I said about Venus and Moon not being comfortable in Aquarius brings to mind that the 5 and 7 of swords make one aware of the things that may be uncomfortable about being human. Both of those had mutilated heads. The Venus or Moon are not as comfortable in Aquarius. The abundance of head or face imagery makes one think of awareness and being aware of these discomforts. I really like that. Whereas the Mercury ruled one, he was able to rise above, even though he was disdainful of the humanity below him. That brings to mind the Aquarius. It's Aquarius that taught me this. That Aquarians love humanity and hate humans. Oh, somebody neither knows this or looked it up, but the word mutilate originally meant to deprive something of a characteristic feature. And the head or awareness being characteristic of Aquarius have been deprived. Oh, perfect. Wow, thank you. That makes such good sense.
You're deprived or simply altered. Because it's to deprive something of a characteristic feature just simply means it's changing it from one feature to another type of feature in some sense. And also you should be thinking too, like, could this man have mutilated himself as a kind of a mark of achievement of some sort, or as something that he knows that he has to sacrifice in order for this particular paradigm to really reach its fruition? But those are excellent observations from Penny, most definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm trying to work the moon into it too, and lunar cycles. He's at a he's at the last quarter moon there, I think. Having lost so much of his head. And so maybe there is a part of that and maybe even it could be symbolic of how we go through periods of filling our mind with things and then trying to empty our mind of things. Um, and uh, and Aquarius itself would be a very full mind, but maybe Venus or the moon are things that drain our mind or that switch our mind. Somebody said this in the first one, that the cherubs could take us away from things that distract us from what we're doing. So maybe this mutilation or these Venus and lunar influences are things that drain our thoughts, move us, and I that can be for bad, for good or bad. Somebody says there's such incongruity in their faces. She looks almost engaged in worship or watching something grand. Yeah, he is downward facing and more introspective and thinking. Really nice observation. They actually, she would represent more of that full moon. Her face is fully lit. She's looking up. He is a waning moon. Yeah, absolutely love that. Neither seems happy or content though. Yeah. And the moon is our emotions, and because it is so uh um changeable, um I think of I'm trying to think of the other the the song titled La Donna e Mobile is coming to fickle. Fickle is the word I want. I'm like, why do I know this in Italian and not English? That doesn't make any sense. Woman is Fickle is the title of that piece. And uh yeah, there's it's changeable. The moon is changeable. And so that makes sense that there's not often contentment. Venus maybe with Taurus, ruling Taurus and having some of those associations might be able to achieve a little bit more contentment, but the moon is always changing and always different. So it doesn't necessarily represent contentment for sure.
Okay. Well, I've got that's all I've got for my AV.
And so I feel like this, I know I personally am feeling a little out of sorts today. But I still feel like I got a lot of, even if I wasn't able to verbalize a lot of the ideas that I'm having, definitely am thinking of that a lot of things are percolating away. Um, Anybody have any either questions or just additional comments that they want to open up to discussion or just that they want to share?
I do feel like these three cards, but particularly the 5 and the 7, are cards that many feel are the most ambiguous or hard to grasp or can't connect with. And so I think it is cool to do how you guys are presenting it today, to just, like you said, percolate and just find new ways of relating, because I think some of the age-old interpretations and imagery, like people are still like, I don't really know, so thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question. It's Sabrina.
Yeah.
You had started a sentence, Joy, and I didn't know if there was an end to it. So I just wanted, I could be just barking up a bad tree, but I was like, oh, I want to hear the end of that sentence.
Do you remember what the beginning was?
Yes, yes. You were talking about the 5 and 7 of swords, Venus and the moon in particular. You said drain our thoughts and move us. And then
Oh yeah, move us led to mobile, which led to fickle.
Okay.
This is my brain on Neptune transits right now. Yeah. And so the moon, where I was going was that the moon grows bigger and fills up and grows smaller and empties out. And Aquarius is emptying out a jug, and emotions fill us with feeling of some kind, and then they go away and they empty us out. But we're in Aquarius, which is extremely mental, so the moon is filling our brains with ideas, but then also taking them away and emptying them out. And there is it brings that fickleness. I think I used the word I forget what word I use now, but I used another word before I came up with fickle. And yeah, it's I think that there is times when we are trying to gain information and learn things, and that is filling up Aquarius. That's what Aquarius wants, is knowledge. And I think the moon is reminding us that there is a other side of that, because we're in the mutable decan. And that's why I said the moon is, I said, I think I used the word mutable. That's what this is. It's like the words that come out are referring to 3 or 4 different things in my head, and I don't always manage to explain all of the things that are going on in this weird brain of mine. So we're in the mutable decan, and I think the moon is mutable in that it changes a lot. And so we are leaving the Aquarian decan and moving towards Pisces. And so that is a dissolution of the Aquarian decan, and a transition out of the Aquarian decan. And so and there are times when we try to gain information, but the moon might even remind us, just like what we're doing here. John's question that took me by surprise, it's like, is what we're doing experimental? I'm like, I don't know. And then the more I think about it, I'm like, well, it is. Especially the way we're looking at it today is very Aquarian, and losing the information and setting aside, like Penny said, all the things that came before that we know about tarot, and this means blah, 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 and we've all learned that, and da, 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 and trying to like find other ways of informing these images and understanding these images. That's trying to empty the knowledge that we have, and coming into this emptiness where we can scry, and just letting this new fog form, and these new ideas and these new images and these new understandings come into, kind of rise up out of that lunar imagination and that lunar visualization and imagination and vision, which is a keyword for Aquarius. So the moon's vision is a intuitive vision, whereas the Aquarian vision tends to be more of a a thoughtful plan for something. And so putting these together, and maybe the guys with the swords, that is one of those cards, like Penny says, that everybody's got kind of like, what is going on here? Is he stealing the swords? Is he taking back something that was stolen from him because he's taking it from a war camp? And so those people, the people in the tents, are not the ones that live there. So maybe they came in and stole swords from the people that lived there. It's like, what's going on? Nobody knows. And I've got another sentence that I don't remember where I was going with it. But maybe maybe he's taking away. In my Morgan Greer deck, the swords on his shoulder were all shadows. They weren't real, which I interpreted a certain way for a long time when I was first learning tarot. But now I'm like, maybe he's taking away our intellectual underpinnings, our intellectual support, like the swords in the ground that are a support to hold up perhaps our tents or something like that. And removing those, so that we have to find a new way of supporting our ideas, a new way of building our tarot interpretations, building our own beliefs, our own plans, our own vision, and uh, Aquarian ideal, building our utopia. We have to let go of a bunch of things in order to make that happen. I mean, that to me is the Saturn as the ruler of Aquarius. Is when they built these, the first 2 years that I lived here was this steady, like, building. I know Penny has been through this recently, building of all these townhouses next to us, and they had to start with that, they had to completely raise the land, which was very tragic because there were some old growth trees there, including an old oak and quite a number of really beautiful cedars. And they cut it all down and they raised it totally. And that was, I mean, that was an extremely emotional day for me when they did that. And I hadn't even lived here that long, and I still felt the absence of those things that were rooted in the ground and held together and identified. The trees mark space, and they identify location. We use them to mark our boundaries, and all of that was gone. And then they came in and built really ugly townhomes, so that was not a good use of the the raising of the land. But we can do that for ourselves. We can raise the things that we don't need anymore, or even maybe things that we've relied on for a long time, and see what new things will grow in that place. And I think that is that filling up of the mind and achieving the intellectual fullness, and then the releasing of it as we grow, as we try to start anew, like the moon. So that's the Seven of Swords. That's your new interpretation. Is getting rid of your old ways of thinking and coming up with new ones. I have no idea if that's ever gonna hit, that'll ever stick for anyone, but that's what we've got today. I wrote a blog post. I got two blog posts on the Seven of Swords on my website, but one of them, the old one, it's called Meditations on the Seven of Swords. If you go to my website and search, just click the search icon, magnifying glass icon, and search Meditations on the Seven of Swords. I talk about the original Star Trek episode called oh shoot, why are words so hard today? Anyway, the something of the gun, I think, but it's where Spock and McCoy and Kirk and all of those guys find themselves in the gunfight at the OK Corral. Spectre of the gun, that's it, Spectre of the gun. And Spectre, because that's the shadow, and my Morgan Greer had those 5 swords as shadows, it's Spectre of the gun. And they have to, Spock has to like hypnotize everybody or mind meld with them to whatever, to convince them that what they're seeing, because they have visualized that somebody early in the episode, of course, some red shirt gets shot and dies. But then they find out that they're not actually in reality, they're actually in a visualization or in some kind of like a mental construct or something. And so Spock, of course, is immediate like, oh, I can't die then. But the others can't do that with their mind. They can't erase the reality that they're in, and that they've seen somebody actually die. And so he has to mind meld with them and plant this idea that it's not real. It should be, that's the quote that I used. It should be true, but it isn't true, I think, is what Spock says about an experiment that he does. It should be true, but it isn't true. And then he realizes that they are not in reality, they are in like a simulation. Oh, thanks, Sabrina. Yeah. That's it. That's the link right there. Oh, interesting. So it's interesting considering the Eight of Swords being trapped by limiting beliefs that follows. Yeah, interesting. So There you go. That's my that's my interpretation. We've gone over. I need to shut up. And the Nine of Swords was still being haunted by these negative thoughts and fears, and the 10 where you're stabbed by all of them and temporarily defeated to rise again anew. Yeah, yeah. It all fits really nicely. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for coming. Hopefully this did get your wheels spinning, and maybe you'll get some traction again as you're falling asleep or as you're brushing your teeth or showering or wherever your ideas come. And maybe next time you pull one of these cards, you'll think of us. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you everyone for coming.